I built a game with PHP. So my wife really likes to play Mahjong, but existing websites are rather crappy. And so I decided to build it for her from scratch. Now I'm a PHP programmer and I like to stick with what I'm comfortable with. So I looked into Livewire. It's a library that abstracts away all JavaScript and allows you to write PHP instead. It's kind of cool. By the way, stick around until the end of the video because I've got a question for you. So while I'm doing setup work like creating a Laravel application and installing dependencies, let me explain Livewire. Instead of writing JavaScript and manually handling events, communicating with the server and so on, Livewire scans your HTML for specific tags and will automatically perform server requests and update your DOM for you. The only thing you need to do is to return a re-rendered view of whatever component you're updating, and Livewire will take care of the rest. So most logic happens server-side, and Livewire will provide clever hooks and update the DOM all behind the scenes. For example, with Mahjong, there are tiles that can be clicked. Our game logic will need to define what happens whenever a tile click event occurs. Now the only thing we need to do is tell Livewire to handle such a click event on a tile. And how do we handle it? Well, with a PHP method that will return a re-rendered view of that tile. Or in our case, we'll re-render the whole game board every time because that's a lot more convenient. Now I know it might sound a bit complicated, but just follow along and you'll notice how natural it all feels. So I've got some boilerplate stuff set up. I've got a Livewire component called game. It has a blade view and a PHP class. This is the class where we can hook into click events and stuff like that. I also need a way to model my game. Now, Mahjong is a simple tile game. You've got a board of tiles and you need to find matching pairs. And the goal is to clear the board. Now, you can only match tiles that are open, meaning they should be on top, and you need to have an open edge, so no tile on the left or right. And to model all that game logic, I'll use two classes. A tile class containing its position, value, and state, and a board class, which is basically a collection of tiles. Since this board class represents all the game's state, we'll have to persist it somehow. I will use session storage in this case, but you can use a database, Redis, file storage, whatever you want. We have this init method that fills the board with a number of shuffled tiles, and we render that board in our blade view. I already wrote all the boring CSS and use grid to lay out our tiles, and it looks something like this. So we have a board with tiles, and now we're going to add some interaction. Whenever we click a tile, we want to select it. And let's first assume all tiles are clickable and we'll add the game logic later. With Livewire, the only thing we need to do is to add a wire click hook on our tile and provide the name of a method in our game class. And remember, clicking happens client-side, but Livewire will transform and send that event to the server, and we don't need to do anything with JavaScript. Let's add that handle click method. It will get the X and Y coordinates, and I already wrote a method in our board class to find the topmost tile in that position. Once we have that tile, we'll change its state to selected, we persist our board, and that's it. It works. Now it might seem a bit magical, but remember that Livewire is simply re-rendering our blade view with that newly persisted board. And I already wrote the CSS to style selected tiles differently, and so we have clickable tiles with just a couple of lines of PHP code. Now this is only the beginning, of course. We'll need to add logic to determine which tiles are clickable, and we'll have to remove matching pairs. Let's start with clickable tiles. Our board knows about all tiles, so it will have to decide whether a specific tile is clickable or not. Let's add a canSelect method in our board class. It takes a tile and we expect it to return true or false. I won't go into the details of how this function works, but I will leave a link in the description to this repository so that you can read through the code if you want to. So with canSelect in place, we can now guard against selecting unselectable tiles in our handle click method, and we can also use it to style unselectable tiles differently. Next, we'll add pair detection. When two tiles with the same value are clicked, they should be removed from the board. In order to do so, we'll have to detect whether there's already a selected tile and check whether the tile we're selecting next has the same value. Again, the bulk of that logic is defined in the board class, and our game class acts as the bridge between user interaction and that game logic. I don't know about you, but I think this is already looking like a promising start. I remember we wrote 0 lines of JavaScript. Obviously, there are quite a few things missing still. We need to be able to shuffle the board when we're stuck. We want custom board shapes, not just simple squares. We want the ability to show hints to reset the board to detect whether we've won, and you can probably come up with a couple of other features. But the beauty is, we already have all the technical infrastructure in place. Livewire handles all the interaction, and now it's just a matter of adding more logic. That's exactly what I did, and what you're looking at right now, sped up of course. Let's take a look at the progress that I made. The most significant change is probably the board shape. I decided that I wanted to provide some kind of mask which the game could fill in for me. My first implementation was super complicated, but when I revisited the problem a couple of days later, I was able to simplify it a lot. Let me tell you, that's a great feeling. I also added the ability to show a hint when you're stuck and a button to shuffle the board. You can reset the board to start a new game, and I've added detection for when you've won. But there is more work to be done. I probably need to step up my design game, but I'm not that good with it. I want to provide keyboard shortcuts. I can make the shuffler use a seed instead of pure randomness. And I want to make a variation of the game where you keep getting more tiles and you'll have to fight against the game. Anyway, lots of ideas. But what I mainly wanted to show you today is Livewire. I was a bit skeptical of it at the start because, you're always sending server requests back and forth. But on the other hand, you're doing a lot less complex DOM manipulations. And so it's easier on the client side. So here's my question for you. What should we do next? Should I keep working on this little game? And what kind of functionality should we add? Let me know in the comments. And let's make an agreement. If this video reaches 400 likes, I will definitely make a follow-up version. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.